Hello, everyone. This is your host, Susan Rosen, and today I have a special guest who is coming on to talk to us, in particular, having to do with the brain series that I'm doing. And because of all of the different pressures and different things that are coming up and happening in the world, COVID-19, all of the protests and the George Floyd, amongst others. Now we're finding out even more still, continuing. And I wanted to have her on because she is a speaker. She's also a mindset head coach. She's based in the UK, and she has over 25 years of experience in the personal development world. And she loves traveling and teaching a new paradigm of psychology that has been, as she puts it, discreetly emanating throughout the world. And I have met Clesia through that new paradigm. She's been doing it for a lot longer than I have, and I'm very interested to hear more about her experience and also how it has been helping her and how it can help all of us going forward in this time of change. So, Clesia Mendes, say hello.
Hello, Susan. Thank you very much for having me.
Oh, thank you for coming on. It's a real pleasure. Why don't we start with talking about what you feel is the most important thing that you've learned in your life and in your experience that is helping you in particular in this time right now, and how it can help all of us that are here listening.
Thank you, Susan. That's such a good question. The most important thing that I've learned in my life so far is that this is an inside-out world. And what do I mean with that? Is that once you get an understanding of how your feelings, and by feelings, I mean your experience, attitude, feeling state, your state of mind. Once you get an understanding of how all of that works, that your feelings are coming down from thought in the moment, then you are headed in the right direction for the insights that you need. And I can feel confident in my direction. And because at least my focus is in alignment with how we psychologically or spiritually work, it gives me the right starting point. It gives me the right direction. And there are a million things that I don't have to think about. So my mind is quietened by insight. You feel relaxed and secure about the inside out and single paradigm direction. Those are the most important things I've learned so far.
Okay. And then how is it working for you right now, and what are some of the things that we can learn just during our time together here that would help us in dealing with what's going on?
Sure. So to give you some context, so as you said, I have heavily invested in the study of personal development for over 25 years, including the reading of numerous books, self-help books, attending many conferences, seminars, and workshops all over the world. And I've been mentored by top experts in the field of self-development. And I did things like walking on fire, bend arrows, and run marathons. As well, I've studied many modalities. And many of the things, one of the things that while I was in that journey that I had taken away, the main takeaway, if you will, from all of that experience was that it's really important to have a positive outlook in life, right? Okay, so that's how I used to think that that is a really useful thing to know. That is important to have a positive outlook in life. And then something happened that changed my perspective, because a few years ago, I had a partner and our relationship crumbled.
Mm.
And as our relationship crumbled and we split up, my my emotional state went into a tailspin, right? And the strange thing that really ticked me off was that not the entire positive thinking in the world could not shift things for me.
Mm.
And while I was in that tailspin, I I had like moments of clarity as well, like everyone else. But I was really curious. I was like, hang on a minute. How come I've studied all these things and none of them are helping me right now? What's going on? Because I was feeling stuck, almost like walking in molasses,
Mm.
right?
Okay. Yeah.
And I was sinking down and down and down. Things were not shifting. And finally, in a moment of clarity, I've heard and I reached out to a transformational coach. And my coach, after a very short conversation, really shown to me, he made it really visible and available to me how our experience of reality is created from the inside out, meaning that I'm feeling thought in a moment to moment to moment, 100% of the time. And in that regard, is the same for every single person in the planet, all 7.46 billion at the moment and more being born. And knowing that gave me hope, right? And that started shifting things for me. And then all of a sudden, that deep sadness that I used to feel about the breakup, things just cleared. And I started thriving again. Now, how is this relevant? How is this important? I can tell a story, probably would be in order to show the comparison and contrast. People may not know this, but back in March, I was very, very sick. And I don't know it was COVID-19 for a fact, but I assume it was because we didn't have the test back then. And while I was really, really sick, there was a day that I was so sick and feeling so weak that I thought that I was dying. But at the same time, my mind was very clear. I was feeling clear and sharp. And then this thought occurred to me, said, oh, well, Clesia, what if this is it? This is how you die of unknown virus, something new, COVID-19. I was like, I don't know, I'll be okay. And then another thought popped, and the thought was, how about your family? And then another thought came. It's like, oh, my family will be upset for a while, but then they'll be okay. Yeah, eventually they'll rebound. That's the nature of it. And then another thought came through. It's like, how about your friends? It's like, yeah, my friends would be sad for a while, but eventually they would get over it as well. They would get back to center. So again, why is that relevant to your question? Because while I thought I was dying, I really believed that I was dying, my experience was very peaceful, right?
Okay.
And why is that? Because I was having those thoughts, and I was having peaceful thoughts in a moment, and therefore I was having a very peaceful experience. That is all that was going on. So fast track this, and then I recovered naturally because I'm here telling the story. I did not die. Fast track this, and as you mentioned, I'm based in UK, and all of a sudden I start hearing on the news all this conversation and agitation that is going on US regarding the assassination of George Floyd and many other people as well, and how intrinsic racism is becoming visible, right? And is really manifesting in a great way. And people are protesting from both sides, right? Pro-racism, anti-racism. So people are coming to the streets, and all of this is happening. And all of a sudden, because of those news, because I start hearing more and more, and when I'm talking myself, I'm also thinking about the other people that also saw on the news they saw that man dying for 8 minutes and a couple seconds over and over and over
Yeah.
again.
Yes.
And potentially that they started kind of jiggling memories from the past, because all of us human beings, we have seen people, or we have been a victim of prejudice, or we have witnessed prejudice, right? And we were in a position where unfortunately we could not speak up, because that would put us in danger as well. It is a reality. It is a reality. And based on what is happening right now, we're seeing signs of that, where people who are protesting both sides, regardless of ethnicity, people are showing up dead, right, in the 21st century. So it is real, and it is dangerous. So I could see, and I started feeling very agitated. In fact, when I say that I was feeling agitated, I was so upset because, as I said, these memories were coming up. I was seeing all the stuff in the media in terms of the news. I was seeing people's reactions around me. And then a couple of things started manifesting in certain ways. For instance, I stopped sleeping. And when I'm saying I stopped sleeping, that means that I would sleep for 1 hour, wake up for 2 hours, sleep for 1 hour, take up for 1 hour. Obviously, that was affecting my productivity as well. And I was like that for 10 days straight. And why I'm telling these stories, the story of when I thought I was dying of COVID and I was having a very peaceful experience, and the story of learning about George Floyd and other people's assassinations and having that sort of experience. Because in the moment, contrast from two stories, when I was feeling really agitated, I was not seeing that I was experiencing my thoughts in the moment, right? Now, it's really important to clarify something. That does not mean that those things weren't happening or that they're not happening. They are, right? They absolutely are. It's really happening already, and it already happened. It's just the experience that I'm having, it only works from the inside out, right? And it's always the power of thought taking form in the moment. Now, I realize I've been talking for a while. So what are you hearing, Susan? What would you like to chip in?
I was so involved in it. It takes me a second here. I can really resonate with what you're saying, where there are so many different things in our lives, and we react to them differently. But at the same time, we react in the same way. So it's all coming from the same place. A reaction comes from the same place. It comes from, as we say, inside, and our thoughts about it. And it's always so interesting to me how we react differently, and not just within ourselves, but across people, because some people might have had the same experience that you had with the COVID-19, for instance, or any other serious illness. And they may not have come to that peaceful experience of it. They may kind of go off the deep end with it and go into the pain, or into whatever they think is going on. And so I find it so interesting that in your description of all of both experiences, that it's not that you didn't have a reaction. It's that you were able to see the reaction and then kind of go with it, and then let it kind of play out, and and then see where you are and how you can take that internally. I'm not being very articulate here, but I guess it just is so amazing to me, not specifically you, but the whole human experience in having reactions to different things. And there may be somebody else who would have the same two experiences as you and freak out on the COVID-19 part, and on the other part, distance themselves to not, so they don't freak out on the other. And so I'm always amazed how we all do the same sort of thing. We go through a lot of the same process, but we all experience it so differently. I'll just, something that happened, as you well know, let everybody else know, Clesia and I had recorded this podcast last weekend. And I got all ready to get started and we had a really good discussion. And I started working on getting it ready, and I was going to post the video, and I was stripping off the audio and doing all the little techie stuff that I love. And realized that I couldn't hear my side of the conversation. It had not gotten recorded. And it ended up being because on the back end, there was a problem with which microphone Zoom was connected to. And well, you guys don't need to know all the details. But anyways, I would say that probably 6 months ago, I would have gone off the deep end over that. I mean, I did. I was swearing at the computer and swearing at myself and all of this. And my husband came in and thought I'd killed myself or something. And I'm like, no. And I told him what happened, and he gave me his advice. But I would have been beating myself up about that for days, maybe even longer. And having learned this inside out way of looking at life and living life, I realized that about an hour or so later, I was okay. I wasn't beating myself up. I was just like, well, that happened. Okay, send Clesia a message saying, can we do it again? Please.
And I said, absolutely.
Yes, and I thanked her many times. But it kind of takes the edge off of it. I think that's the maybe that's not totally true. That had the edge at the beginning, but then I was able to move on. I was able to say, okay, it's just my reaction. It is what it is. Let's get on with life and do something about it.
I love that. Can I add something to that, Susan?
Yes, please.
Well, I love that story for a number of reasons. The first reason is that it's fresh and new, right? Something that is happening and it's really practical. So sometimes when people hear us having this type of conversation, people may have a sense that is kind of ethereal. It was like, oh yeah, it's a nice philosophy. And I must assure you that it's very practical. Just imagine what it would do for you if you used to beat yourself up for months and all of a sudden you can get over it within an hour.
Yeah.
Right? And think about a solution. How much that frees up your mind to be present in the moment and do the things that you need to do. And that sort of thing is not an implication that we could, if someone were to tell us, okay, what are some of the benefits of learning getting a deeper understanding of the inside out? paradigm. And we could not tell you, well, when you do a mistake on Zoom, you'll be able to correct your mistakes sooner, because it's not in the
Oh,
manual. We never know how it's going to show up, right? But
yes,
reality,
yes.
life just becomes so much easier. That is what I
Yeah,
wanted to point out.
yeah. No, absolutely, absolutely. And, to tie it into this podcast and my theme in doing this whole podcast is having to do with health. And it is, it's so much healthier to not hold on to things,
Mm.
to be able to look at it and say, oh, okay, I'm reacting. That's my thought in the moment. Now I'm going to move on to the next thought. Um, and it's not really a control mechanism as much as it becomes more of a way of being.
Mm.
Um, and it's also something that you can kind of read about, or you can listen to people talking about it, and it's one of those things where you get this aha moment when it really becomes, it's no longer just an intellectual exercise. It really is inside you, and it really is. And I'm pointing here because that's in my heart chakra, or whatever you want to call it, that's where I had that insight into it, and kind of fell into it, or fell off. I
Mm.
never remember what the better way of describing it, but um, it's just such a yeah. It becomes almost like an all body kind of feeling,
Mm.
as opposed to just being up in your brain and your intellect, and trying to to use your intellect to fix something, or change something, or deal with it. I realize that we say it has a thought, and the thought has a feeling,
Mm.
but it's still, to me, it's more from my heart than it is from my brain.
Yeah. And I'm glad you've pointed that out, because there is one of the distinctions that people sometimes make. When you're talking about the thought feeling connection, which, by the way, are two sides of the same coin. You always feeling your thought, just the only way it works. They may ask, when you're talking about the thought feeling connection, are you talking about the brain? And I can tell people, well, yes and no. What we are pointing to, it's that energy of life that
Mm.
powers the brain, right? That energy of life has that is connected to everything. For instance, even without having a scientific background, every single person knows how to see the difference between a person that is alive and a person that is not alive, right? Once the person expires, there is that ethereal energy that is no longer there. That is what we are talking about, that powers everything. And that is what we are pointing to. And so when we're talking about the power of thought, is that power that gives an experience, as human beings, give us the power to have an experience of life, always from the inside out.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I agree. It's it's really quite powerful. you know. And I know Clesia and I were talking before we started today just a little bit about meditation and you know, Buddhist meditation. There's, you know, there's so many different kinds of meditation, but it's essentially for the same reason, which is to be well, like with Buddhist meditation and Vipassana, you focus on your breath. And by focusing on your breath, which again is down here in your heart chakra, you stop focusing on all the other stuff. and you, the more you do it and the longer you do it at a time, but also, you know, years or whatever, excuse me, from practice, you develop that same kind of being able to drop into that place within you, where you it's why it's called practice, because you're exercising a muscle, and that muscle is your consciousness, and being able to come from your consciousness to life and to anything that happens, which is very similar in some ways. The vocabulary is a little different, but a lot of the feeling is similar, which is not, it's not exactly the same. I mean, I realize that, but for some people, it may give them a way in to wanting to learn maybe more about the inside out, or the principles as they're called. And just the knowing the fact that one of the things you and I were talking about was that one of the people who is, I don't want to call them a leader because they're not leaders, one of the teachers, I guess, Dickon, in the Inside Out, has a lot of background in Buddhism and meditation and all of that. So it's all kind of tied up together. They're all trying to get at the same thing. I have a teacher that another teacher that I've been working with for many years, and what her place is what she calls your love place, and defining your love meditation. And that's finding someone or something, some experience that just fills you with love. And then whenever you need to center yourself, that's where you go. And you think about, you know, for me, it's when my husband gives me a big hug. And I just think about that, and then, you know, it's like, I just get all, you know.
Susan,
yeah.
I would like to point something right now, because it's happening in the present moment, right? So you're talking about your husband hug, and I've seen you have a style anyway, but I've seen you lighten up, right? And what I would like to point it out, I don't know if you noticed that right now your husband is not giving you a hug, but you're feeling your husband's hug because you are thinking about it.
The thought, yes.
That's always the way it works. Yes, it's getting created by the power of thought in a moment. So the husband is not present, but just thinking about it gives you that experience of the hug. Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
Is that correct, what I'm pointing at?
Yes. Oh no, absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah. 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 So that, I think that's kind of my point. It's like all of these different modalities, and they're all trying to create the same thought, feeling in our bodies, because it's almost through our bodies that we can approach and deal with all of these good and bad feelings, good and bad thoughts.
In a way, yes, and in a way, it's an unavoidable evolution. That is one of my teachers used to say. It's unavoidable evolution. And why is that? Because early in the beginning of this podcast, I was sharing my experience of over 25 years of personal development. So I've done all of those things. And then I get to a crossroad, but all of those things are not helping me, right? So the question arises, why is not helping? What else is out there? And asking the question opens up the door for something new that is more in alignment with the way things already work. And that is what makes the difference for me. So naturally, I can't talk for other people or their experience, but I assume based on results that they've gone through, everyone would have a different path and a different journey, but they've done all of those things as well. But then they get to a point where they come across this that for whatever reason is more in alignment, and all of a sudden they can relax because there is less to do, and still you have the experience of being at peace, being connected, clear-minded, in your, like you call it, your heart chakra. You get the experience without the practice. And if someone has a practice, I'm not saying stop doing your practice, absolutely not. Keep my saying is, do what makes sense to you, right? Because everyone has free will, but do whatever makes sense to you. And if later stage makes sense to stop, do it. But if not, just do what makes sense to you. And just being aware of that, it's enough. It gives you the space and freedom to be you. You do you. Right? You don't need to compare with other people. You do you, because you are the only person who knows what is best for you.
No, absolutely. Absolutely. I totally agree. I totally agree. For me, I just find it so fascinating that all of these different modalities, people, practices, that for me, it's like they're all pointing at the same thing. I think that the inside out and the principles, to me, just makes it clearer. It isn't a matter of, oh, you have to sit on the cushion and meditate for 20 years before you get enlightenment. And that I don't want to say it's a shortcut, because it's, but it kind of can be, depending on when it hits you and you get it. But I think that they're all, like I say, they're all trying at base. They're all trying to get that same message across. And then, of course, from a health point of view, meditation is wonderful for your brain. So, there can be other reasons to sit in meditation on a regular basis. Just like going out for a walk. It's the same kind of thing. So Yeah, it's very I guess, well, part of that is me. I mean, I'm always been very interested in history. I have a bachelor's degree in history. Um, so looking and making all these connections and seeing how all of these things, right? One of them for thousands of years,
Mm.
and one of them for what, 50 years, 40 years, I guess. And but it's the same.
Mm.
It's the same, you know, we as human beings are trying to get the message. And some people
Yeah.
get it. Some people fall into it right away. And some people can communicate it, but some people fall into it and can't communicate it either. I mean, they do the one and that's it. You just have to look at how they live their lives.
Yes, yes. And I really love that. I've got a 6-month mentoring program.
Mm.
And yesterday I was having our one-to-one call with one of my mentees. And interestingly enough, we were talking about listening, right?
Uh-huh.
And my mentee was telling me, last Wednesday I've attended a listening workshop, and the instructor told me there are 9 techniques that I need to be aware of. So she started listing those techniques, and obviously she forgot a few because 9 is too many to track. And she was like, what are your thoughts on these techniques? And I told her, it occurred to me in a moment. I said, you know what? There is listening at the intellectual level. There is listening, and then there is listening. I'll do it again. There is listening, and there is listening.
Yeah.
And the way I see it is listening at the intellectual level is almost like, imagine the sea, right? There is this big torment. What do you call it? Tempest? Oh, I can't remember
Yeah,
the word.
yeah, like a tempest, like a storm.
Storm. Yes, I like that word, is better. Storm. So there is this big storm going on at the sea, right? And you've got the boats frailing and getting shut against the rocks and breaking, and men and women, we need to be inclusive, men and women getting thrown at the sea. There is all this stuff going on at the surface. And as you go deeper into the sea, there is this deep, deep
Mm-hmm.
calm and quiet and peace, right? At the surface is hectic, but at a deep, deep level is quiet
Mm-hmm.
and peaceful. And I said, to me, listening at the intellectual level seems like that. So you've got 9 pieces of information and measurements that you're tracking. But when you are really listening, is peaceful, is quiet, it's simple. There is nothing to do.
Mm-hmm.
And still, everything gets communicated. Everything that needs to get communicated gets communicated and received. So that is what I was sharing with my mentee. And then I asked her, what did you hear? And she was, you know, sometimes when I'm giving a speech and I'm speaking from that deeper feeling, I notice that my audience gets impacted. And the reason I know they get impacted is because 2 or 3 or 4 weeks after the speech, they are still telling me how impacted they were by the speech. But when I'm delivering a speak from the intellectual aspect of it, there is a lot of information, is exciting, but people forget about it. I was like, isn't that interesting? So in a way, you already get a sense of the difference between listening
Mm-hmm.
and listening, in the same way that we get a sense of speaking and speaking.
Yeah,
Yeah, that is what
yeah,
occurred to
yeah.
me.
Yeah. Oh no, absolutely. And just thinking
Mm.
is I know, just in when I'll be writing something, and I noticed this when I was still in college, it would it's like I would get into a zone and I would just be able to keep typing and typing and typing or writing or whatever. And it wasn't like it was perfect or anything, you'd go back and you'd make some changes or whatever, but it was just, you'd just be totally there, like I was just um, writing it. I was just writing it down. You know what I mean? Like it was being told to me somehow or another, even though it was me telling me. But yeah, it was really just getting into that whole zone again. From, as you were saying, from the lower part, and not the intellectual necessarily, although obviously the brain is always involved. But um, yeah, no, absolutely. And I agree. How can you listen when you're trying to think, when you're trying to remember even two or three things that you're supposed to be doing? Let alone you can't listen. I've done that before, not where I'm trying to remember, but you know, sometimes when I'm sitting listening to somebody talk or whatever, and or watching a really dull movie, um, and all of a sudden I'm thinking about something else, and I'm not listening. I'm listening to my own thoughts going off on whatever. So yeah, that's oh well, they must not do
Okay,
much
yeah,
listening.
I like that. I like, oh well. And then I was thinking, how is this
Yeah.
relevant for people who are listening to podcasts right now? A couple of things. So first one is is normal, even though it's not natural. It is normal for us to get lost in thoughts, either in a past, right? We might feel guilty, worry, sorry about what happened to the in the past, things we cannot do anything about it anymore, right? That is normal. In the same way that is normal to be worried or anxious or apprehensive about the future. That is totally normal.
Mhm.
Now, what I would like to highlight and bring to right here, right now, is that even though it's not normal, even though it is normal, it's not natural. And natural is being in a space of neutrality and being present in the moment as best as we can, right? And if someone is listening to this and they say, how I like the sound of that, but how do I make myself to be present as best as I can? And just noticing when you're not in a present moment, it's enough. Because once you notice, it's almost like poking a finger into the thought bubble you were lost in. It just runs out of air, just pew, and you are right here, right now, again. And why is that helpful? Why is that important? Because being in a present moment is when you've got access to your creativity, you've got more access to your innate well-being. You're going to have insights about what you need support most. It may occur to you, for instance, if you've got like a food allergy, to pick up that book or listen to that podcast or reach out to that person. You might not be too clear yet when that happened, why it's happening, but just following the hunch, when you are present in the moment, is a lot more likely for those helpful insights to come through and for you to hear them and see them and to take that next step. That is what I know to be true.
That's wonderful advice. I would totally agree. with all of that. And having been through many years of being stuck in the past and or worrying about the future, I know that neither of those are very helpful, especially because you lose the present. When you're in one or the other, the present keeps on going. And the present is the only place you can do anything. So I think that is a wonderful place to maybe wrap up this podcast. I know you have some other appointments that you need to do, and I really appreciate you coming back on today to talk about this. And it's interesting because I think we went even further actually than we did on the first one. So this one's even better.
Yes, it's natural evolution. It keeps getting better and better.
That's right, exactly.
So when you want to do a third one, maybe in 6 months or so, I'm all for it.
There
Just
you
please
go.
let me know.
There you go. That sounds like, yeah, we'll come back together and say, okay, so now what's changed, right?
Yes.
What's the new thing we're all worrying about? So let me just do a little wrap up here and let everybody know that I will be putting some links up in the show notes if anyone is interested in contacting Clesia, and her Facebook page as well as her website. And I let's see, do my usual, which is that I am not a doctor, and nothing on this program is to be construed as medical advice. If you are having some kind of a medical emergency, emotional or physical, please contact your own doctor or go to the emergency room if it's at that level. And with that taken care of, I want to say thank you to Clesia one more time. And I will be signing off, and I will talk to all of you next week.